Hello and welcome to CIPR TV, brought to you by Marketeers 4DC. I'm Russell Goldsmith, and on today's show we look at the latest developments in public affairs and lobbying. With the government consultation on introducing a statutory register of lobbyists closing this Friday, debate within the industry is widespread over who and what any potential register should include. I'm therefore delighted to say that joining us in the studio today to discuss the issues and answer any of your questions are Iain Anderson of Cicero Consulting. Iain was also recently the CIPR's Public Affairs Group Chair, and alongside Iain is Tamasin, Director of Spinwatch and leader of the Alliance for Lobbying Transparency. So welcome to you both. Hi. Now, influencing public policy is an issue of public interest, and both the CIPR and the Alliance for Lobbying Transparency agree that increasing the amount of information available about the processes will restore trust in policy making and assist in making ministers, elected representatives and officials more accountable to the public. Lobbying has also hit the front pages most recently over Cash for Access, which implicated Downing Street and the top tiers of the Tory party, raising pertinent questions about lobbying and democratic freedom. Now, as usual with CIPR TV, we're giving you the chance to join in the discussion too. So if you have a question you'd like to put to Iain or Tamasin, you can use the submission box on the page or tweet your questions or indeed any comments on the show with the hashtag #CIPRtv, and we will do our best to give you a mention. So coming to you first, Tamasin, would you call yourself a lobbyist, and do you think lobbying is a force for public good?
Yes, I'm at pains to state that I am a lobbyist. I am. I often get asked this question. But clearly I am a lobbyist. I'm lobbying for a robust statutory register of lobbyists. And I think that it should apply to me as much as it should to Iain and his company and anybody working in-house. Is it a force for good? Clearly it's very good. Government needs to listen to voices from outside government. That's how we get good policy making. The problem that we have at the moment is the way that the lobbying industry, this £2 billion industry is structured, is that most of the money comes from large corporations and it happens behind closed doors. So there's this element of secrecy, which means that we don't know who is meeting whom, what they're discussing and how much money is being spent. So those are the key problems that we have with.
Well, Iain, I think we're confident in saying you are a lobbyist.
I am a lobbyist.
And proud of it.
I am. I'm proud as a lobbyist.
But on that note, how does that make you feel? I mean, we've had a lot of comments coming through, and obviously there was a recent Times editorial described the industry as murkier than the world of political party funding. So how do you respond to something like that?
Well, I mean, one of the things that I think has been really good about this process, and I absolutely congratulate Tamasin on everything you've been kind of doing as part of this process to get this debate out there. I mean, I've always taken the view, I took the view when I was in the CIPR Public Affairs Chair, we need to drive out of the industry those who are not prepared to be transparent. And I think actually shining a light on what lobbying is, and Tamasin has just talked about its legitimacy, if it's transparent, if people can see what's going on, I think this process has been quite useful to shine a light on those of us, I think, who are doing it in a transparent, overt and obvious way, and those who are just not prepared to step up to that plate. So if newspapers make those kind of comments, I kind of understand why they do, but this process allows us to explain what lobbying actually is. Yeah,
there's been discussion about those who follow codes of conduct and those who seek undue influence, I think is the term that's been used, isn't it?
Absolutely, and you know, I absolutely sign up to a code of conduct. I think that's absolutely important, but I think those codes of conduct, and I'm now the past chair of CIPR PA, those codes of conduct need to be seen to have teeth. They need to be seen to be effective, and there need to be obvious and kind of clear sanctions. So I'm looking forward to seeing what the government's response to this lobbying consultation looks like, and hopefully we can get on with actually putting in place a statutory register as quickly as possible. So
with the amount of... Oh, sorry.
Well, I was going to say, I don't doubt your commitment to transparency, but there are those in the industry who've talked about transparency a lot. There is this agenda, there is this proposal on the table, so people will talk about transparency. I could only cite Lord Tim Bell on Newsnight the other night, and he said, well, you know, we've always been transparent about our clients, and it was not only 3 years ago that his chief lobbyist, Peter Bingle, sat in front of a parliamentary select committee and said the public has no right to know who our clients are. So I think there are degrees of transparency, and plus there there are codes of conduct in place, but I mean we've just seen one being tested, the PRCA. So after the Bell Pottinger scandal, where there appeared to be a clear breach of the code, and that they weren't necessarily behaving in compliance with the code, and yet they've just been let off because the alternative would be to chuck them out of the PRCA, which would actually mean that they wouldn't then have to declare their clients, and we'd have less transparency. So these systems are constantly being tested, and there are degrees of transparency.
No, I absolutely agree with that, and I'm as you know, I think probably viewers know, I'm not sitting here defending those who are not prepared to stand up for transparency, and I do agree that, you know, I think you look at that PRCA example, it's not good. It's really not good, and I think there are questions there as to whether or not you know, bodies like that are acting effectively.
Well, if Lord Bell is watching, maybe he wants to tweet us a comment, and we can pick up the discussion. I mean, there's obviously with that in the news at the moment. Is the current media scrutiny a good or a bad thing for the whole lobbying industry? Well,
if I can just sort of, I mean, it's sort of almost the point I've just been making. I mean, I'm very happy with the level of scrutiny at the minute, because I think it allows those of us that are prepared to say who our clients are, prepared to say who works for us, prepared to very openly have conversations with Westminster and Whitehall or Brussels, make very, very clear our intent. I think it really does paint a difference. For those who are not prepared to stand up for what they do, I mean, frankly, it's it's up to them to defend their actions.
Yeah. I mean, does this pick up on the fact, because you've said before that professional lobbyists are rarely, if at all, the ones involved in any of the lobbying scandals?
Well, yeah, I mean, a lot of the stories that have been done by the Sundays in particular, you know, there hasn't been a professional lobbyist to be seen. I mean, the latest example, you know, the expression I've been using throughout this is that this person's a rogue trader. You know, not a part of CIPR, not a part of the APPC, not even a part of the PRCA. So,
but
you know,
she's clearly acting as a lobbyist. I mean, she is operating as a lobbyist, and she seemed to dismiss the moves towards greater transparency, saying, "Oh, I provide other services, and no, I don't think I'd have to register." And she's not this bad apple argument. It doesn't hold much water with me, because we see one bad apple after another. And when the bad apples are companies like Bell Pottinger, for example, who seem to be breaking codes of conduct. And whether they are being transparent about their clients or not, who knows, because nobody's checking the voluntary registers, then I think that argument doesn't hold much water. Just on this question of whether the media scrutiny is a good thing or not, I think it clearly is good in that there is a public appetite to know what, in the words of David Cameron, what deals are being done and what favours are being exchanged. And the more that stories get into the press, the more we learn. But it's a very, very bad thing, because it's always in the context of scandal. And lobbying isn't actually, it shouldn't be a scandalous thing. And what it does is it undermines public trust every time we have a scandal. So what you do is you bring it into the open, and therefore you have the so what factor. You know, somebody, so-and-so's lobbying so-and-so, and they're talking about this, that and the other, and they're discussing a contract, you know, whatever department it's in. Well, then, you know, so what? We know that's happening, and then, you know, there's no stench of scandal about it.
Which is why I say bring on the Statutory Register.
Not as
you know, we can talk about that probably in a bit. But you know, my concern is that we may be just waiting too long for the Statutory Register to come in, because I think the bad apple point. I think we can go a long way with the right kind of Statutory Register to drive people out. In the CIPR response to the government, which I think we went public with at the back end of last week, you know, actually talking about a licence to trade here, Tamasin. You know, frankly, you know, the example that we saw 3 or 4 weeks ago. I mean, I call him a rogue trader. We're going to debate that point surely, but actually, if a register becomes about a licence to operate in that sense, I think that's a pretty tough sanction. The question is whether or not we're going to get there.
Well, let's pick. I mean, what concerns? We're talking about it closing on Friday. What concerns do you have then with the register? Just picking up on what you just said.
There are 2 key concerns. The first one is the absolute poverty kind of scope. There's no There's no scope. They're only proposing that it would cover a fraction of the industry, and we're talking, I mean, estimates between anything like 10 and 25% of the industry. So that's only those lobbyists working in agencies, and it's not clear whether it means people working on behalf of third-party clients working in law firms,
Indeed.
or management consultants, or accountancy firms. And
Yep.
you need a level playing field, so you need to include all those multi-client lobbyists. But it excludes all the in-house lobbyists. So I know that you represent, I don't know, maybe 1 in 10, I think, in-house lobbyists at the CIPR.
At CIPR, yes.
At the CIPR.
Although I run a consultancy, but
Sorry,
yes.
I mean, at the CIPR, so there are thousands of in-house lobbyists who wouldn't be covered by this. I mean, that's everybody from Greenpeace to Tesco and the CBI. I mean, big lobbying forces. So that's the first key concern, is the fact that it would only cover a small fraction of the industry. The second...
Is it not a starting platform?
No, but it's the wrong starting platform.
I mean,
it's the wrong starting platform. We need
sidestepped.
universality
Yeah,
here.
okay, yeah.
We need a level playing field for everyone who is professionally, not talking about constituents talking to their MPs,
Yeah.
but for everybody who is professionally lobbying, they need to step up to the plate and they need to be on this register.
On this we agree, definitely.
We definitely agree on this.
The second key point, I'm not sure whether we will agree.
We'll see.
Is the depth of information. So the government is proposing that lobbyists only say who they are and who they are working for.
Yeah.
So effectively, all you're getting is a list of names and a list of clients.
Well, this is going to tie in with a tweet that we've just had in, but go on, carry on, and then I'll push this.
So what they've not proposed is that you could see the transparency about the lobbyist dealings with government. So that is whom they are talking to in government, what issues they're discussing, whether it's regulation, policy, government grants, all the interaction that, in fact, that's what a statutory register is all about. It's about ultimately increasing accountability of government and government decision making. But they've actually decided not to include any of those the lobbyist interactions with government. So we will frankly get a meaningless list of names, and it will give us no insight into, again, quoting David Cameron, the deals being done, the favours being exchanged, and who's having undue influence.
Well, there's a tweet here. This is from Duncan Cantor. So just give him a mention. This has come via Twitter. Are there degrees of transparency? The words you use to tell the truth are as important as your decision to be truthful. So I don't know if that's a... Yeah.
No. I mean, I think that's right. I mean, I think Tamasin was just saying that the government has decided. I mean, to be fair to the government, just for a moment,
right, yeah.
This is still a consultation. We're all lobbying hard into that consultation, and I think it's fair to say as well, within CIPR, we held a meeting with Mark Harper. I know you guys have done meetings with Mark as well. You've appeared on platforms with Mark, and the consultation starting point. I think anybody who is serious about this debate now believes is inadequate, and I think the Minister, to be fair again to him, in those conversations with our members and the various other groups, Trade Association Forum, all the other conversations I know he has been having and the press has written about, he clearly is on a journey, certainly in terms of the public statements that he's making.
Yeah, no,
so
I agree.
I think that where this lands is still up for grabs, and the chance to have a register which provides a level of meaningful transparency, I think is still very much there. I mean, my key thing though here is, again, I probably said this a little bit earlier, but I think the industry, I think folks like yourself who are lobbying around these issues want to see this happen as soon as possible. I think from the perspective of ordinary voters and the perspective of folks like myself running a lobbying business, to be able to get on beyond this moment as soon as we can is quite important.
But is it only a case of making it happen as soon as possible if it is covering everyone?
There's no point in introducing this. I mean, if you had
It has to cover
universality with this level of information, so we'd get to know that Tesco's or whoever, Greenpeace employs X amount of lobbyists and these are their names and they work for Greenpeace. But what discussions are they having? This proposal as put forward by the government is not for a statutory register of lobbyists, as I understand it. This is a
statutory register of consultancies at the moment.
Yeah, it is, but it's not a lobbying register, as I understand it, as exists in the States and in Canada, and even the voluntary one in the EU.
Just going to, as I said, we've got lots of questions come through earlier when we were publicising the show. We're actually over halfway through already. It's shooting past, so if you've still got comments, please do use the box below the screen you're watching on, or do tweet using the hashtag #CIPRtv. One of the comments that has come through is actually, and it relates to other questions we've had, is actually sort of like what the key definition is of lobbying, because if there are different levels of it, is there a sort of one universal definition that we should use?
Yeah, I was going to say, I wish there was. Yeah. There's a huge debate about this. For me, the kernel of this is, is this your job? Do you do this professionally? Mm-hmm. Yeah, as I say, because I think it's very important that the ordinary interaction between constituents and their members of parliament is not caught by that. That would be ridiculous. But I also think, it's not just about the professional piece. It's actually about whether or not you are trying to, you're talking to policymakers to change policy. Now that could be legislation, that could be a statutory instrument, that could be a procurement decision. That's absolutely crucial. I mean, particularly in terms of this debate. So, how and why are you talking to policymakers, and how are you talking? So that could be a telephone conversation, that could be a meeting, that could be an email. I think we do need to capture all of this, and I know CIPR, we've had a go at the definition as part of our response to the government. So again, there'll be various views on what the definition is. I'm sure you guys have put a definition in too as part of this process. Hopefully we can come out of the end of this process with a definition that everybody can agree upon.
I don't suppose actually our definition is going to be vastly different from yours, because when you think about it and when you look at the existing ones in the States and Canada and Brussels, there is a lot of similarity there between the definitions. What you need is something that approaches it not the way that the government has done. In that they have tried to define who a lobbyist is, and they've said, or anybody working in an agency. The way to do it is to try to find the activity of lobbying. So once you have that defined, anybody who is then paid to do that activity is then
professionally, yes.
Exactly, yes. Is then a lobbyist. We think above a minimum threshold. We don't think that smaller charities, small businesses, for example, should be captured in it, but that's fairly straightforward to do. So we have a definition which is actually not vastly dissimilar to what you've just said. It's anybody who's arranging or facilitating contact with a legislator or a public official as defined, anybody who's communicating as defined to influence legislation, regulation, policy, grants, contracts, and then any work in support of the above. So if you're preparing briefing papers or supervising lobbyists, that we think should be included in it. The key point on the definition, I remember when I first started this job, which was about 5 years ago, I had an email from a guy who has 15, 20 years of experience of this in the States, and he said to me, don't let them distract you on the definition thing. They did it to us for years. They did it to us for years, and it was a way to delay having an effective system put in place. Was this, it's so hard to define who a lobbyist is. It's not. They've got a great definition in the States. They've got a great definition in Canada. Let's nick one of those.
But I don't actually think now we are...
We don't need to talk about this anymore.
No, we're not far away from this. But I mean, again, I think the government does, as the next stage of this conversation, in the consultation before we move to legislation or whatever format this is going to be in, we need to grasp that nettle.
But it would look very incompetent if it took them months to come up with a working definition that suited our part. It needs to suit the British political system.
It needs to suit the British system.
It does. But it's not beyond the wit of the government to come up with something that works.
Well, we've had another comment come through from Twitter. This is from Ian Hall, and again, based on some of the things you've just said, I can guess your response to this, but Ian has said, it seems as if, despite Cameron's speech in February 2012, the government has little appetite to tackle this issue properly. Do Ian and Tamasin agree?
Yeah. I mean, the constant delays in this. I can't believe we're still having the conversations that we're having at this stage in the debate, this far down the line. I mean, it has been a very, very long, drawn-out process, and I think it will be over the next year as well. It's great that they're consulting, and I think they're going to consult on the next stage as well when they produce a draft bill. Great. But let's keep the momentum up. There is a public appetite. For what 50% of people polled in October last year think that lobbyists have too much influence. There is a problem in this country, widely recognised, and they need to sort it out.
I think that you put deficit reduction on one side and you put doing the Statutory Register of Lobbyists on the other. I know which one's easier, but the inevitable political focus is back to the in-tray, and the in-tray is deficit reduction and public services and those kinds of debates, and one can understand why it's there, but I come back to where I was before, that the industry wants clarity. Those who are lobbying for change want clarity. Let's just get on with this.
But I'd say it's in the context of actually what's happening at the moment. We've seen the massive public debate and public anger over, for example, the NHS reforms. Or another great example is the changes to planning. Now, both of those have been dogged by accusations that the government is listening to industry, whether it's the construction industry or private healthcare, over the views of the public, and that then creates this very suspicious. The public is very suspicious of the reforms that are going through, and we're going to have more public sector reform. And I think it's, this is why we need transparency now. There is so much public money up for grabs.
In the budget, the government talked about transparency in terms of people's tax returns. That's another American idea. Basically, effectively, what public spending you're contributing towards. I think that's a broadly good idea. So it's sort of transparency on that idea, but we're moving very, very slowly on the lobbying piece. I do see parallels there. If the government wants to be a government around transparency, then frankly that fits. This debate fits that debate very effectively too.
Well, we've probably only got time for a couple more questions actually, because we've been going for well over 20 minutes. So just are there any other issues in the consultation that you want to see covered or that should be discussed at all? Are there any other issues that we haven't picked up on so far today? Those are our key things, that it must be universal. I agree with Iain on that. And that it must, as a minimum, say who is lobbying, who they are lobbying for, whom in government is being lobbied, what they are discussing, and how much money is being spent in the process. And that is what a statutory register looks like. Okay. Well, I think we have actually run out of time. So unless you've got any final comment, Iain?
No, just as I say, I think let's just bring this on. We want the clarity. Let's just get on with it.
Okay. Well, thank you both for joining us. Thank you all for watching. That is unfortunately all the time we have. Don't forget that all previous episodes of CIPR TV are available on demand at CIPR.tv, and you can also subscribe to our channel on iTunes and download all the shows from there too. Just go to the iTunes store, search on CIPR TV, please subscribe and help us climb the podcast chart. Thank you again, both Iain and Tamasin, for joining us today. Thanks for watching. Thanks again to my colleagues here at the production team at Marketeers 40C, and we will see you next time. Goodbye.